I saw the disdain in my daughter's eyes, Sarah, when she handed me a plastic piggy bank with $2 inside. It was her Mother's Day gift to me, delivered seconds after I revealed the brand new BMW I'd bought for her with my life savings. The air still hummed with the shock and excitement from my own surprise for her. Just moments before, my heart had been so full, watching Sarah's face light up, a rare, genuine smile spreading as she took the keys to that shiny new car parked right outside, wrapped with a giant red bow. I'd poured everything into it, every spare penny, every sacrifice, imagining her joy, hoping it would finally show her the depth of my love, a love I'd always tried to express in quiet ways. She'd given me a quick, almost dismissive hug then, already turning to pull out her phone, probably to post photos, but I didn't care. I was just so happy to see her happy. I thought, this is it. This is the moment she'll truly feel how much I care. Mark, my son-in-law, he always had a smirk, a way of looking at me that felt like I was some kind of antique, a relic from another time. He just stood there, arms crossed, watching. Sarah came up to me, still that strange, almost performative smile on her face. "We have a present for you too, Mommy," she announced, loud enough for everyone to hear, even though it was just us three in the living room. My heart fluttered with a different kind of anticipation. A gift from her. I hadn't expected anything, really. My gift to her was all that mattered. I opened the box, and there it was, a cheap plastic piggy bank. It looked like something you'd win at a fair. Not even a cute one, just a plain pink plastic pig. My hands trembled slightly. I looked up at Sarah, searching her eyes. Was this some kind of joke? Mark stepped forward, a wide grin on his face. He took the piggy bank from my hand, shook it with a flourish, and 2 crumpled $1 bills fell out onto the carpet. "It's so you don't lose the habit of saving your pennies," he shouted, and then he laughed. A loud, booming laugh that felt like it echoed off every wall, every cherished memory in that room. Sarah joined him, a high, tinkling sound that grated on my ears. It wasn't just a laugh. It was a wave of pure, unadulterated disdain washing over me. In that instant, everything shifted. The joy I'd felt seconds before, the warmth in my chest, it all shattered. The love I'd poured out, the sacrifices I'd made, the very essence of my being as a mother, it suddenly felt like it had no value at all. My own daughter, the one I had given everything to, was laughing at me, with her husband, about the smallness of my life, the perceived insignificance of my contributions. It wasn't just the cheap piggy bank, you see. It was the look in Sarah's eyes, a coldness that cut deeper than any insult. It was Mark's mocking tone, the way he emphasized saving your pennies, as if my whole life had been nothing but a quaint, pathetic effort. It was the feeling of being utterly, completely invisible, even as I stood right there in my own living room, the very place I had always considered my sanctuary. The sound of their laughter. It wasn't just in my ears, it was in my head, a jarring, cruel rhythm that wouldn't stop. I just stood there, holding that empty, hollow plastic pig. Every sleepless night I'd spent working, every thread I'd sewn, every worry I'd carried for her. It all flashed before my eyes like a silent, black and white film. All of it, dismissed in a single, careless laugh. A strange, cold calm started to settle over me. It wasn't anger, not yet. It was something deeper, a profound realization that the love I had given, so freely and unconditionally, had been weighed and found wanting. Whoa. But in that same breath, a tiny spark ignited, a silent, unwavering resolve. They thought I was nothing more than an old woman clinging to pennies. They had no idea that this humiliation, this silent rejection, was the very fuel I needed. I didn't say a word. I just squeezed that plastic piggy bank, the cheap, hollow plastic biting into my palm. My silence, from that day on, would come at a very high price, a price they couldn't even begin to imagine. My daughter thought I was worthless, just a little old woman saving her pennies. But they were about to discover that, in truth, I owned far more than they knew. But what they still didn't know was that the will, just like my heart, already had a new owner. My daughter thought I was worthless, just a little old woman saving her pennies. But they were about to discover that, in truth, I owned far more than they knew. But what they still didn't know was that the will, just like my heart, already had a new owner. My name is Eleanor. I am 72 years old. And my hands, they've been a seamstress's hands my entire life. From dawn till well past dark, my fingers have felt the rough texture of denim, the delicate whisper of silk, the steady thrum of my old sewing machine. When my husband, bless his soul, passed away, I was still so young. Sarah, my only daughter, was just a little girl then, barely knee-high. It was just us two, against the world. And so I raised her. Every single day was an act of will, fueled by the sweat of my brow. I mended clothes for everyone in the neighborhood, trousers, dresses, worn-out shirts. I worked through the nights, often by the dim light of a single lamp, just to make sure she never went without, never lacked anything that a child needs, or even a few things she wished for. My life, it was always simple, really. It was built on a few core beliefs: saving every cent I could, mending what was broken, and caring deeply for the people and things in my life, especially for Sarah. For me, love wasn't about big, flashy declarations. It showed itself in the quiet, steady details, in the warm cornmeal cake, baked fresh in the late afternoon, its sweet aroma filling our small kitchen just for her, in the electricity bill paid on time every single month, so our home was always bright and warm, in the silent, unwavering support I gave her, pushing her gently but firmly so she could get the college education I never had the chance for. That was my language of love. Quiet, consistent, always there, like the hum of my sewing machine. After my husband passed, I kept living in our country home. It's a big, spacious place full of so many memories. Every creak in the old floorboards, every sunbeam that cuts through the kitchen window, it all holds a piece of our past. Sarah and her husband, Mark, that's my son-in-law, you know, Sarah's husband, they loved spending weekends out here. They'd light up the barbecue in the backyard, laughing, making all sorts of big plans for their future. I suppose it was a nice escape for them, a quiet retreat from their busy city lives. A place to relax and dream. I always kept an old shoebox. It was just a plain, worn-out shoebox, tucked away deep at the back of my wardrobe, beneath stacks of carefully folded linens. That's where I stored all my important documents. Nothing fancy, just official papers. And in that shoebox, among the old letters and photographs, was the deed to this house. My late husband, he was always so careful, so thoughtful. He insisted on leaving it solely in my name. Just mine. Perhaps he sensed something, a need for me to be protected, to have something truly my own. I don't know, but he made sure of it. No one, not Sarah, not Mark, ever bothered to look at those old papers. They just sat there, quiet, untouched, for decades. To them, to Sarah and Mark, I was just Mommy, the frail figure, living on a small pension. Someone who, in their minds, depended on their good graces for everything. I'd hear them whispering sometimes, not even trying very hard to hide it. Whispering about how the house was too big for me now. How one day they'd need to take care of all of this. And by all of this, I knew they meant my life, my home, my very existence. It hurt, to hear your own daughter and her husband talk about you like you're some kind of burden, some problem they'd eventually have to solve. But they didn't know the full story. While I sat there, mending their clothes, patching up their torn seams, quietly, steadily, I was also weaving something else. Weaving my independence, weaving my own security for the future. They thought they knew me. They thought they had me all figured out. Just Mommy. A simple old seamstress. But I was more than that. I had always been more than that. I was strong, resilient. I had built a life piece by piece. What I didn't yet know, though, was that my greatest proof of love, all that silent support, all that quiet devotion I had poured into my life and into her, it would somehow become the very weapon they would use against me. In the months leading up to that Mother's Day, I started to feel a shift. It was subtle at first, almost imperceptible, like the changing of the seasons. But deep down, I knew something was different. Sarah, my daughter, she started to grow distant. Her calls, once a welcome chat about her day, became these quick, hurried things. Just a few words, a rushed "love you, Mom," and then click. Her visits, they weren't the relaxed, joyful times they used to be either. Now they felt like obligations, squeezed in between other more important plans, always with one eye on her watch. I remember, I even mentioned, with a little twinkle in my eye, that I was saving money for a big surprise for her. I wanted to share my excitement, to see her face light up, even just a little. But she'd just wave it off, a dismissive little smile playing on her lips. "Oh, Mom," she'd say, almost with a sigh. "You don't need to worry about that. Just save your little bit of money." It was said kindly enough, but it felt like a pat on the head, like I was a child playing with toy coins. Mark, my son-in-law, Sarah's husband, he was even more direct. He'd make these cutting jokes, sometimes right in front of me, about my habit of jotting down every single expense in my little notebook. The one I've kept for years, just a simple way to track things. And he'd laugh about how I reused everything, from old jam jars to bread bags. It was always a joke, he'd say. But his eyes, they never laughed. They held something else, something cold and knowing. This coldness, it was subtle, yes, but sharp. It pricked at me. It was like a draft you couldn't quite find the source of, but it cut right through you, leaving you chilled. Then they started making decisions, big plans, without even bothering to consult me, like planning a huge Mother's Day lunch, right here in my own house. They invited all their friends, a whole crowd of people I barely knew, without ever asking if it was okay, if I even wanted a crowd, or if I had other plans. I remember standing there, listening to them talk about the guest list, and I just felt like an extra, a stranger, someone who was just there, in the background of her own life story. I tried to justify it to myself, you know. I told myself it was just the rush of their daily lives, the stress of their jobs, the pressure they were under. They're so busy, I'd think. They don't mean anything by it. But deep down, a thin ache, a dull throb, started to settle in my chest. It was the pain of not being seen, of fading away bit by bit, like a photo left too long in the sun. I'd hear Sarah on the phone sometimes, her voice full of excitement, animated and bright. She'd be talking to her friends about these expensive trips, dinners at luxury restaurants, clothes she'd bought. Her world, it sounded so vibrant, so full of life. And then, sometimes, just minutes later, she'd call me. Her voice would suddenly become sweet, almost childlike. "Mom," she'd say, "could you bake that simple cornmeal cake of yours for the weekend? You know, the one you always make. Mark just loves it so much." It was then, slowly, that it dawned on me. I was useful to them, yes, but only when I represented simplicity, only when I was the safe haven that cost nothing. The quaint, old-fashioned mother who made comforting, cheap cakes. Any attempt of mine to participate in their world, their discussions about fancy things or big plans, it was always met with an awkward silence, or a quick, condescending smile, like I was trying too hard, trying to fit in where I didn't belong. Bless my heart. But what I didn't imagine, not then, was that this contempt I felt building, drop by painful drop, was about to turn into something much bigger, something much colder. It was about to become a deluge of pure humiliation. The day of the party finally arrived. The house, my home, was full, full of people I barely knew, Sarah and Mark's friends, buzzing with chatter and loud music. I moved through the rooms, a ghost in my own space. I felt like a stranger, watching a movie where I had no part, just a quiet observer in the background. My heart, though, it was still pounding with a different kind of anticipation. I had my surprise, my big reveal, and I was so nervous, so hopeful. I waited for just the right moment, after everyone had finished lunch, when the laughter was at its peak. I took a deep breath, gathered what courage I had, and asked for everyone's attention. My voice, it felt so small in the big room. Then, with trembling hands, I handed the shiny BMW key to Sarah. The room went completely silent. You could have heard a pin drop. Then a gasp, a few exclamations of shock and surprise. I watched Sarah's face. Her eyes, they gleamed, not with joy, not with gratitude, but with something else, something I hadn't seen before. Covetousness, a hunger. She grabbed the key from my hand, and without another word, without even looking at me fully, she ran outside. She had to see the car, the one with the giant red bow, parked right there in my driveway. She gave me a quick, cold hug when she rushed back inside, barely brushing my arm. She was already pulling out her phone, more concerned with taking photos, probably for social media, than with acknowledging me. My moment, my gift. Minutes later, she came back into the living room, still laughing, a small gift box in her hands. Mark, her husband, was right behind her, a wide, smug smile on his face. "We have a present for you too, Mommy," she said, her voice loud, making sure everyone could hear. Everyone. My heart fluttered with a tiny, hopeful beat. A present? From her? I took the box. It was light. I opened it carefully, a strange mix of hope and unease swirling inside me. And there it was, a cheap plastic piggy bank. Not even a nice one, just a plain, pink, hollow pig. My hands, they felt suddenly heavy. I looked up at Sarah, my eyes searching hers, begging for some explanation. Was this a joke? A cruel one? Mark, my son-in-law, stepped forward. He took the piggy bank right out of my hand, almost snatched it, and shook it with a theatrical flourish. 2 crumpled $1 bills tumbled out onto the carpet, landing with a soft, pathetic rustle. "It's so you don't lose the habit of saving your pennies," he shouted, his voice booming with mock cheerfulness. And then the room erupted. Laughter, a chorus of it, loud, jarring, echoing laughter that seemed to come from every direction. I stood there, holding that cheap, hollow plastic pig in my hand. The sound of their laughter, it didn't just fill the room. It seemed to pierce me right through my chest, twisting itself into every cell of my body. I looked at my daughter's face, Sarah, my Sarah. I searched for a shred of remorse there, a flicker of decency, a hint of kindness, but there was nothing. She merely smiled, a bright, unconcerned smile, finding the joke amusing. Her eyes, they were cold, empty of any warmth for me. In that single agonizing moment, the unconditional love I had felt for her, the boundless, sacrificing love of a mother, it shattered into 1,000 tiny, sharp pieces. It wasn't just the pain of humiliation. It was the pain of absolute realization. The pain was so deep, so silent, so utterly profound, that no one in that room, not a single person, realized that the woman they thought they knew, the Eleanor they had taken for granted, had just died right there in front of them in her own living room. But what my daughter didn't realize, what none of them could possibly know, was that along with my pain, a strength she never dreamed I possessed, a fierce, quiet power, was being born. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't make a scene. The laughter, Sarah's and Mark's, and the polite, nervous chuckles from their friends, still hung in the air, thick and suffocating. But I didn't break. Something inside me, something I didn't even know was there, just held. I took a deep, steadying breath, one that felt like it was pulling air from 1,000 miles away, and I managed to put a fragile smile on my face. A smile that felt alien, not quite my own. "Thank you, my dear," I said, my voice surprisingly steady, almost calm. I even looked directly at Sarah, whose eyes still held that glint of amusement. "It's a very creative souvenir." I made sure to emphasize creative, a subtle jab she probably didn't even catch. Then, with movements that felt stiff and deliberate, I gently picked up the plastic piggy bank and placed it carefully into my purse. It felt absurd, putting that cheap thing next to my old wallet and my handkerchief, but I did it. It was a trophy of sorts for a battle I hadn't known I was fighting. Then I turned. "I just need to check on the coffee," I announced to no one in particular, using the oldest excuse in the book. It was my escape hatch, my way out of that mocking spotlight. I retreated to the kitchen, leaving the sound of their renewed chatter and laughter behind me like a receding tide. Once I was alone, truly alone. The kitchen's quiet was a stark contrast to the noise in the living room. I walked to the sink, my hands gripping the cool porcelain, leaning against it as if to hold myself up. My gaze drifted out the window, past the herb garden I'd nurtured for decades, to the driveway. And there they were, Sarah and Mark, my daughter and son-in-law, showing off the brand new BMW, my gift, my life savings. They were laughing, pointing, basking in the glow of the shiny car, completely oblivious to the silent earthquake they'd just caused inside me. The humiliation, it burned. It was a slow, searing fire in my chest, worse than any physical pain. But with that fire, a strange thing happened. A clarity, cold and sharp as a winter morning, washed over me. It was like a fog had lifted, showing me things I'd been blind to for far too long. All the subtle slights, the condescending smiles, the dismissive words, they all clicked into place, forming a complete, devastating picture. That night, after everyone had finally left and the house was silent once more, a quiet that felt vast and empty, I didn't sleep a wink. My mind raced, not with sorrow, but with something new, something determined. Around 2 a.m, I got out of bed. The floorboards creaked under my bare feet as I walked to my room, to the back of the wardrobe. I pulled out the old shoebox, the one I mentioned before, the one I kept hidden away, full of my important papers. I carried it back to my bed and placed it gently on the quilt. I opened it. Inside, all those documents lay waiting. The deed to this house, my country home, registered solely in my name, just as my late husband, bless him, had insisted. The statements of my savings, the money they thought was so meager, the pennies Mark had laughed about. And there, yellowed with age, a copy of my old will, where I had left everything, every single thing I owned, to Sarah. My heart didn't ache as I looked at it. I didn't feel anger either, not really. What I felt was a cold, unwavering determination. I reached into my purse, the one I'd used earlier, and pulled out the cheap plastic piggy bank, the one with the 2 crumpled dollar bills still inside. I placed it on the bed, right next to those papers. That silly, pink plastic pig, it suddenly wasn't just a joke anymore. It became a symbol. They had given me, with their cruel laughter and their cheap gift, the exact measure of my worth to them. $2. That was it. And in that quiet dawn, as the first hint of light began to paint the sky outside my window, I made a decision. I would use that exact same measure to define their future. The game, my dear, had changed. And for the very first time in my life, I wouldn't be playing to please anyone. Not anymore. I would only play to ensure my own dignity, my own peace. But what they didn't know, couldn't even guess, was that my silence in the days that followed wasn't weakness. It wasn't me licking my wounds and fading away. No, it was simply the time I needed to prepare my final move. In the following weeks, the silence between us grew. It wasn't just a quiet pause. It became an abyss, a vast, echoing emptiness that swallowed every memory, every shared moment. Sarah didn't call, not once. She didn't call to apologize. She didn't call to ask how I was doing. Nothing. It was as if I had simply vanished from her world. The only news I had of her was through the bright, glossy photos she posted on social media. My neighbor, Mrs. Henderson, she's a dear, sweet woman who means well. She'd sometimes mention, "Oh, Eleanor, did you see Sarah's new pictures? She looks so happy." And I'd log on, a knot tightening in my stomach. There she was, traveling. Always with the BMW, the shiny car I had bought for her. My sacrifice gleaming in the sun. Dining in expensive places. Living a luxurious life. A life paid for with my sleepless nights. My savings. My love. It was clear. I had served my purpose. I had given my gift. And now I was invisible. Utterly, completely invisible. One day, I couldn't bear it anymore. I took the initiative. I picked up the phone. My hand trembled a little as I dialed her number. She answered. Her voice, it was bored, distant. She said she was very busy. "Mom, I really don't have time right now," she said, her tone flat. I tried to talk about what had happened at the party. To explain how I felt. To just open a door, even a tiny crack, but she cut me off, right there, in the middle of my sentence. "Mom," she sighed, a little exasperated, "are you seriously being dramatic over a joke? For heaven's sake, I have real problems to deal with." My heart, it just stopped. It just stopped, beating for a second. A joke. She called it a joke. I didn't say anything back. I couldn't. I just hung up the phone, slowly, gently. There was no anger, not then, only a cold, hard certainty. There was no longer any space for me in her life, not as a mother, not as a person, only as a bank account, or maybe a service provider. Someone to be used when convenient, to provide, to give, and then to disappear. The loneliness, it pressed in on me, a heavy weight. But it wasn't just loneliness. It was the feeling of being used, a deep, hollow ache that settled in my bones. Then came the last straw, the one that snapped something inside me. I heard it through Mrs. Henderson, my kind neighbor. She stopped by, her eyes wide with local gossip. "Eleanor," she started, "did you know Sarah and Mark are planning a big birthday party for him? A huge one?" I listened. My heart pounded. "And it's going to be at your house," she added a little too loudly, delighted by the news. My house, my home, the place where my husband and I had built a life, the place where I had raised Sarah. They were planning a party here, a big birthday party for Mark, my son-in-law, and they hadn't even had the decency to invite me or to inform me. Not a word, not a text, nothing. They were simply treating the property as if it were already theirs, as if I didn't exist, as if the deed in my shoebox, the one with my name on it, meant nothing at all. The loneliness, the feeling of being used, it reached its peak right then. I was a ghost in my own story, a silent observer in a life that was supposed to be mine. I was a tool they used when convenient, a comfortable backdrop for their lavish new existence. But what they saw as my end, as me finally fading away, was in fact my starting point, the quiet beginning for the greatest lesson I would ever teach them. But what they saw as my end was in fact my starting point for the greatest lesson I would teach them. I arranged a meeting, a quiet little gathering with Sarah and Mark. I invited them to the country home, my home. My pretext was simple enough. I wanted to discuss the future. I said it with a calm that, looking back, might have already hinted at the change in me. But they wouldn't have noticed. They were too busy, too sure of themselves. I arrived a few days later, pulling up the long gravel driveway in that shiny BMW, the one I had bought them. They stepped out with an air of superiority, you know, that familiar confidence, almost a swagger. I could almost hear their thoughts, the plans they were making. They were probably ready to convince me, gently of course, that it was time for me to move to a smaller place. Maybe a little apartment in town, easy to manage, less trouble for everyone. They had it all figured out, I was sure. I waited for them in the dining room. The old wooden table, usually covered with a lace cloth, was bare, clear. Everything was in its place, neat and orderly. On that table, there were only three things, three very specific things. The old shoebox, the one from the back of my wardrobe, now open just a crack. Next to it, the plastic piggy bank with the 2 crumpled dollar bills still inside. And then a new folder, a crisp, cream-colored folder from a law firm in Atlanta. It stood out, stark against the aged wood of the table. "It's good that you came," I said, my voice steady, calm, a calm that truly surprised them. I could see it flicker in their eyes. They must have expected tears or anger, but there was none. "You seem to have a lot of plans for this house, for this place, so I thought it was time we looked at some papers." I reached into the shoebox. Slowly, deliberately, I took out the original deed to the house, the one my husband had insisted be solely in my name. I placed it gently on the table, sliding it across so it rested right in front of them, centered between Sarah and Mark. The paper was old, a little yellowed, but the words were clear. My name, Eleanor. "As you can see," I continued, my gaze moving from the deed to their stunned faces, "this house is and always has been solely in my name. My late husband, bless his soul, he wanted it that way, to protect me. I paused, letting the words sink in. The ground you stand on, the ground this house sits on, is mine. Mark's confident smile, the one that always played on his lips, it vanished. Just evaporated, leaving his face oddly blank. Sarah, my daughter, she turned pale. Her eyes, usually so sharp, now looked wide, almost frightened. The color drained from her cheeks, leaving her looking fragile, almost transparent. The air in the room, it felt heavy, suddenly too thick to breathe. Then I reached for the new folder, the one from Atlanta. I opened it and carefully took out a copy of my new will. I held it up just for a moment, then pointed to another yellowed paper peeking out of the shoebox. This, I said, my voice still unwavering, this was the old one, the one where everything, every single thing I had, was yours, my dear. I looked at Sarah, whose eyes now darted from the old paper to the new one. But this, I continued, holding up the new document, this is the new one. I explained it to them, clearly, simply. All my assets, I told them, including this house, this big country home they had so many plans for, and the money they didn't even know I had, the savings they had mocked, it would all be left to a charity. A wonderful charity, I explained, that cares for abandoned seniors, people who, like me, sometimes become invisible to their own families. Then I looked at the plastic piggy bank, the cheap pink one. I lifted it from the table, holding it gently in my hand. You taught me my worth with this gift, I said, and my voice held no trace of bitterness, just a quiet, profound understanding. Now I will use my estate to help people who, like me, have become invisible to their families. The shock on their faces, it was complete. Mark's jaw hung slightly open. Sarah looked like she'd been slapped. That shock, that raw, unvarnished realization of what they had lost, what they had thrown away, that was my justice. There was no hatred in my voice, no anger, only the quiet dignity of someone who had finally, truly reclaimed control of her own life. But what they didn't expect, what they couldn't possibly have foreseen, was that my greatest liberation wouldn't be seeing them defeated. It would be what I would do next. I didn't kick them out of the house that day. Not then. I just asked them to leave me in peace so I could decide what to do. The silence, after they left, was heavy, but it wasn't empty anymore. It was a silence filled with possibility. A few weeks later, I put the big country home up for sale. It wasn't out of revenge, you know? Not really. It was just that place was heavy, heavy with too many bad memories now. Every corner held a bittersweet echo. Every room whispered of sacrifices that had gone unappreciated. It wasn't my sanctuary anymore. It had become a stage for my humiliation. I needed a fresh start, a place where I could breathe freely without the weight of the past pressing down on me. With the money from the sale, I bought myself a bright, cozy apartment right in downtown Atlanta. It's smaller, much smaller than the country home, but it's perfect. It's near a beautiful park where I can sit and watch the world go by. And there's a lovely senior community center just a block away. It's simpler, yes, but it's entirely mine. In every single sense of the word. No shared memories, no expectations, just a clean slate. My whole routine, it changed completely. I exchanged those long hours of solitude, tending to a huge, sometimes overwhelming garden, for pottery classes. Can you believe it? My hands, these hands that have spent a lifetime with needles and thread, are now shaping clay. It's messy, but it's wonderful. And ballroom dancing. I'm still a bit clumsy, and I step on my partner's toes more often than not. But oh, the joy of it. The music, the laughter. I made new friends there. People who saw me as Eleanor. Just Eleanor. Not Sarah's mom, not the quiet seamstress, not the mommy who saved her pennies. They saw me, truly saw me, for who I was becoming. And the money I'd saved so meticulously for so long, the pennies Mark had mocked, I started spending it. On myself, on little pleasures I had always denied myself. A warm coffee at the local cafe, just because. A new book chosen just for me, without a thought of how I could mend its cover or save its pages. Even a short trip to the coast, with my new friends, watching the waves crash on the shore, feeling the sun on my face. It felt liberating. Every small indulgence was an act of reclaiming myself. Sarah did try to reconnect, you know. Letters started arriving, then phone calls. They were full of belated regret, words of apology that felt hollow somehow, like echoes from a different person, a person trying to undo what couldn't be undone. I didn't close the door completely. No, I'm her mother, after all. But I did set a firm boundary. I told her that if she ever truly wanted an honest relationship with me again, a real connection, she would first need to seek help. To understand the full extent of what she had done, to truly grasp the depth of the hurt she had caused. Reconciliation. It wasn't my priority anymore. Not then. My peace of mind, my inner quiet, that was what mattered most. I was rebuilding my life, piece by piece, not based on sacrifice for others, but on self-respect. And for the first time in decades, I felt truly rich. Not because of the money I had now, not because of the new apartment or the classes, no, but because of the freedom, the sheer, unburdened freedom I had gained. Today, as my hands, which spent so many years with needles and thread, with cleaning and serving, now learn to coax life from a lump of clay, I often think about how life can be molded anew. Even when we believe it has already dried and hardened, set in its ways, there's always a chance to reshape. These hands, they created so much for others, for Sarah. And now they create something beautiful, simple, just for me. A bowl, a small vase, imperfect but real. Each curve a testament to this new beginning. It took a great pain, a deep, searing hurt, for me to truly understand something so fundamental, that my worth was never really in what I could give to others. No, it was in the respect I owed to myself, the quiet, unyielding dignity of my own spirit. I spent a lifetime giving, believing that was the purest form of love. And in many ways, it was. But it also taught me a hard lesson, that sometimes when you give too much without setting any boundaries, people can start to see you as just a source, an endless well of support, of sacrifice, not a person with your own needs, your own heart, your own dreams. It's a strange thing getting older. You can become invisible to some, even to those closest to you, like a familiar piece of furniture in a room. Always there, useful, a part of the backdrop, but rarely truly seen, rarely truly appreciated for its own being. My story. It's just one story, but I've seen it reflected in the kind, often tired eyes of friends I've made at the community center. People who also feel like they've become background noise in their own families. Men and women who have given everything, poured their entire lives into others, only to find themselves feeling diminished, their contributions taken for granted, their wisdom unheard, their very presence fading into the periphery. What I learned through all that hurt, through that stark and public injustice, was that true love, real connection, it has to be a two-way street. It has to include respect, not just for what you do or what you provide or what you're capable of giving, but for who you are, fundamentally, for the individual, for the long journey you've walked. Every person, at every age, deserves to be seen, to be heard, to be valued, and to have their dignity acknowledged, especially when their hair has turned white and their hands have worked a lifetime to build a world for others. This new life I'm building, it's not about vengeance. It's not about bitterness. It's about building a foundation of self-worth, solid and unshakable. It's about finally giving Eleanor, the real Eleanor, the respect and the space she always deserved. A space where my voice matters, where my presence is felt, and where my heart, though scarred by past pains, is finally, truly at peace. And you? Have you ever felt invisible precisely because you're the person who always takes care of everything and everyone? I found my peace, but sometimes when I sit here, shaping this clay with my hands, or just watching the birds outside my new window, I think about all of you, all the quiet heroes out there, the ones who pour themselves into others, who always put someone else first, the ones who might feel that little ache of being overlooked, of being taken for granted, just like I did for so long. It's a lonely feeling, isn't it, to give so much, and sometimes to feel so little in return, to feel like you've become invisible, like a part of the scenery. My story, it's just one path, one journey, but I've met so many wonderful people who carry similar burdens, similar quiet hurts, and I realize we're not alone in these feelings. We deserve to be seen. We deserve to be heard. We deserve to connect, to know that our experiences, our struggles, and our triumphs, they matter. They truly matter. And if you want to keep receiving real stories like this one, stories that remind us we're not alone, stories that help us find our own voice and our own peace, pay attention. YouTube might be unsubscribing you without warning. Confirm you're still subscribed to the channel and hit the bell icon.